A very good morning to everyone. Hope you all can hear me, see my screen. Firstly, a very big thank you to Cloud Bazaar for inviting me as a speaker. And this is Mehzad Karanja, your speaker for today, who is going to be addressing you for the next 1 hour on the topic SEO for e-commerce. But before we dive into the topic, a little background on who I am and why I am addressing you. So I started my journey around 18 years ago with a site called eBay India, which was one of the first e-commerce sites the world had seen. Like once upon a time, there was only eBay and Amazon. So I had the good fortune of working with eBay India and customizing eBay's experience for Indians. And all the knowledge I gained in user experience, I took to startups such as Quikr and Pepperfry. And then I joined agencies such as Foxymoron and Shebang, where I implemented that knowledge on many other clients. And one fine day, I happened to visit IID, which is an institute for imparting digital skills. As a visiting faculty, I realized I love teaching. And today I am this Chief Learning Officer with IID. And that's my profile. I conduct trainings for corporates, working professionals and students. And that's how I'm in front of you. That's about me. Let's begin with today's topic. But before I dive into today's topic, few ground rules. There is a Q&A section that would be visible on your taskbar. You can ask me any questions that you want, and I would be happy to address them towards the end of the session. So keep the questions going. I'll leave the last 15 minutes for Q&A, and we could discuss them. So let's begin. If we are discussing search engine optimization, the king of search engines is Google. But in 1998, Google was just born and was nothing but a stupid child, right? A newborn child wouldn't know too much. And that's how SEO started. Websites started training a search engine which had zero knowledge. But today, Google would be around 22 years of age. But SEO experts seem to have forgotten that. They still treat Google as if it's a 0-year-old child. Google today has millions of servers, lots of server space, where it's storing information about each and everyone's user behavior. And that's how it's getting smarter by the day. So we, by underestimating Google, are making a very big mistake. So to give you some context as to how Google is getting smarter, if you go to a search engine and start typing, Google will predict what you're going to type. And how is that working? It's based on what your behavior has been in the past and based on what other people have searched in the past. So that's AI, right? Artificial intelligence. Google just keeps getting smarter. The more searches happen on Google, the smarter it gets. Another example could be if I were to search for pizzas in my location and you would search for pizzas in your location, the results would be very different, right? That means Google is taking into account the user's location. Any keyword with the word near me, Google is trying to customize the results. Once again, showing that Google is intelligent. It's not just throwing results randomly, or it's not just showing results on a pre-decided logic. The logic is very nimble. It's very customized for each and every user, right? So that's how Google has been functioning. And one more thing that you need to remember, and I'm going to emphasize on this point again later towards the session, is once Google trusts you, once Google sends traffic to your site, if that traffic decides to hit the back button, Google treats it as if the site could not answer the question. And hence the user is searching again, right? So imagine you search for something, you went to a site, did not like it, hit the back button. When you hit the back button, it's like another search that happens on Google. So Google is trained to believe that the site could not answer the question. And that goes against the site. So this is again something Google is saving on its servers. Which site is a thumbs up? Which site is a thumbs down? So if I were to sum up, Google is way smarter than what we believe. All its results are based on an AI logic. It tries map the user search pattern, the past user behavior, other people's searches, and it tries customized results. And there's a possibility that no two people in the world will see the same results. Now, this is another mistake SEO experts keep making, wherein they believe that, and even clients, where they believe that if they see themselves as number one, the whole world would be seeing themselves as number one. It doesn't work that way. Say I search for pizzas online and I see Domino's on number one position. It's not necessary that if you search, you will also see Domino's on number one position. Right? So that's something else. So always remember, there's never a number one. There's an average position. Right? You are averagely, on an average, you are on position 2, or an average, you are on position 10, which means that if you take an average of all the people who saw your result on the search page, there's an average rank that you are getting. There's no fixed rank, right? So never make the mistake of saying, hey, I am always on number one. It doesn't work that way. With that, let's dive deeper into today's topic. I'm going to share 10 tactics for e-commerce sites, which are SEO based. I want you all to write down your favorite tactic, go back and implement it. And if you have a question for me on any of these tactics, I will field them after all 10 tactics are over. So let's go. Tactic number 1. I already briefly discussed this, but it's very, very important. Once the user is on your site, the user should not want to go back. So when you start doing SEO for a keyword, you actually start seeing traffic. You search for yourself, come to the site and behave like a user and ask yourself the question, did I get what I wanted to see? If the answer is yes, then you will not hit the back button, right? So let's take the example of Amazon. I come to Amazon's homepage and I see a bunch of options. I see the navigation up front. I see a banner and I see almost 16 other small thumbnails in the first screen itself. Similarly, if you log on from the mobile phone, you will see around 10 to 12 options to take. So that's a very big learning for you. The user should see variety. The user should have options. The user should be empowered. The user should want to go further. If you give the user only one option or only two options, there is a chance the user may not like either and hit the back button. So if you're taking the user to a product page, show variety by color. If you're taking the user to a category page, show variety by product. If you're taking the user to the home page, show variety by offers. The key is to show variety so that the user feels empowered and says, oh, let me see if I pick color red, how will the product look? The moment the user touches the screen or scrolls or goes further, you have eliminated the chance of going back. And this, according to Google, is a thumbs up, right? Made sense? So I repeat, once the user comes on your site, the user should not want to go back. Do whatever it takes. Have testimonials, have proof, have videos, have offers, whatever it takes. Keep the user on the site. Don't let the user go, right? So that was tactic number 1. Once on your site, the user needs to stick. Let's come to tactic number 2. A lot of times e-commerce sites feel that, okay, I have a white t-shirt page. Now all possible keywords related to that white t-shirt have to rank for that one page. So for example, how to take care of the white t-shirt, same page. Where to buy white t-shirt, same page. Price of the white t-shirt, same page. So that's a mistake. You should actually divide the responsibility of each keyword for a different page. Let me give you an example. I search for Urban Ladder sofa set, okay, which has 590 searches in a month. I come to the sofas category page. But if I search for 2-seater sofa set, Urban Ladder could have very well taken me to the sofas page. but it took me to a special page for two-seater sofas, which is a subcategory page. It has 1600 search volume. And if I search for types of sofa sets, now again, it could have very well taken me to sofas and the user could have figured out a type, but they chose to take me to a blog which discusses the types of sofas. And everywhere there's a type of sofa mentioned, it would probably link back to the subcategory page. So from the blog, it would take links to the various subcategories. So see what they've done smartly. They have recognized keywords with volume and have divided the responsibility. Keywords related to types go to a blog. Keyword related to say how to lay out the sofa in a small room could go to a blog. Okay, or living room furniture could go to a blog. Anything to do with a particular type of sofa goes to a subcategory. Anything to do with generic sofa goes to the category. So the responsibility has been divided. You can further keep dividing the responsibility by adding external sites. So for example, is the Urban Ladder sofa of good quality? Supposing, then maybe there could be an answer on Quora. Sofa set colors, maybe the answer could be on Pinterest. So now Urban Ladder is not only dividing the responsibility on its site, but also having third-party sites like Quora, Pinterest, bloggers, reviewers. So no matter what the user searches, some result of Urban Ladder is going to come up. If it's a picture, Pinterest will come up. If it's a question, Quora will come up. If it's a review, some blogger would come up, and life goes on. So the moral of the story is divide the responsibility of ranking. Don't try to rank with one page. Try to create customized pages for every keyword with volume and divide the responsibility. That way the chances of ranking would become better. So that was tactic number 2. Now let's go to tactic number 3. If every page on your site should have a keyword, that means every page on your site should have meta tags as well. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with meta tags, keep up with me. If you're not, you can just write down this jargon and probably you can read up about it on the internet later. But for now, what I'm trying to say is every page on your site should have a keyword, and that keyword should be present in the meta tags. Let me explain how. So say on an average, an e-commerce site has say 100, 200, 1,000, 50,000 pages, right? Like an Amazon would have zillions of products, while a more niche site might have 200 products. Now, even writing tags for 200 products can be a pain. So what should you do? Here is what Amazon does. It's created a formula by brand name, product name, category name, the quantity in which it's available, it's 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 pieces, the color in which it's available, online at low prices in India. This is like a stuffed keyword, and then dash Amazon in, which is the website's name. So let's take an example. Buy some kind of dining wear. So Cello, blah, 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 Tropical Lagoon dinner set. Quantity 18 pieces. It's available in white color. Online at low prices in India, Amazon in. Now this formula can be extended to any dining set product. It could be extended to any product which is available in bulk quantity, right? Or in multiple pieces, multiple units. Say it was a t-shirt. Again, buy brand name, product name, category name. So buy Nike polo neck t-shirts. Quantity is irrelevant, so you remove it. White color, online at low prices in India, Amazon in. So you can create a formula which will get plastered across your site or across your category. And in one shot, all the tags can be written. Okay. So what I'm saying is that every page, by doing this, will have its own words. It will have its own product name, category name, keyword. And Google is smart enough to make permutations, right? So buy dinner set at low price could become a keyword. Buy dinner set can become a keyword. Buy 18-piece dinner set can become a keyword. Buy cello dinner set can become a keyword, right? So they have written the formula in such a way that smaller keywords automatically start becoming a part of it. And they have automated this entire process of writing meta tags. Now, tomorrow, if you feel that, this cello product is selling extremely well, I don't want an automated formula. I want to actually handwrite my meta tags. I want to actually make better meta tags. You can always go overwrite the formula. You can always go customize the tags for this page. And by doing this, you achieve two things. One is all the pages get tags. Second is all strong pages on your site, you can customize the tags. So it's a thumbs up from both sides. Your work is done in one shot and you can keep customizing as you go along. Make sense? So I'm going to quickly repeat this tactic. You create a formula. You think logically, what should the user see in the meta tag? Write that down. And then that gets created across the site. Remember, meta tags are made of two parts, page title and meta description. What I'm showing you here is the meta description, right? You can create a similar formula for the page title also. And in one shot, everything gets populated. Once you have populated, you can always go customize. You can go page by page and customize the tags. So say you have 50,000 products. In 2 days, you can populate tags for all products. And then over 6 months, you can go one by one to all popular pages and keep updating their tags, keep making them richer, keep making them better. So your SEO has started, but you are optimizing over 6 months. And by doing that, you can manage many pages, right? I hope that made sense. A lot of people do not know how to write these tags or do not know how these tags would look, right? So while WordPress gives you a lot of templates to make tags, one easy tactic is good old Excel. You go to Excel, you put down, so say you go to Excel, put down buy in one column, brand name in one column, product name in one column, category in one, and so on. Put all of this information. Then online at low prices in India, Amazon in. This is static, so put it in one column, right? And you create multiple columns and ultimately use a formula called concatenate, which kind of merges all these columns. So imagine buy, then you had put all the brand names, then all the product names, all the category names in Excel, and then you simply concatenate. All your tags get populated in one shot. Whether it is 10, 100, 50,000, it can all be done in a matter of minutes. Right? So this was the tactic I wanted to discuss with you with regards to meta tags. The next tactic that I'm going to tell you is, okay, you created your meta tags, but now make them a little interesting. Make them a little click friendly. How do you do that? Let's see. So for e-commerce site, there is something called the product schema markup. You can write this down and probably research it later. Product schema markup, where you can put down ratings, you can put down the price, you can put down the quantity. So on the search page itself, along with the meta tags, you also see the schema tags. Yeah, you also see this information, this additional information, which is coming through schema tags on the Google page. This makes your tags more click friendly. So for example, if I can see information up front, the chances of me clicking and wanting to go deeper are better. Now, a lot of you might argue that if everything is shown up front, why should I click? So the answer is very simple. Only an interested user will click. So let's take a scenario. If you don't put this information, lots of people will click and lots of people will hit the back button, right? If you put this information, fewer people will click, but all of them will stay. Now, from an SEO perspective, you got relevant traffic and they all stayed, they all shopped, they all converted. And that's a far better proposition than just getting lots of people. I'm not saying getting lots of people is bad, but I'm saying getting lots of people who hit back, lots of people who hit the back button, that's not a good thing, right? So try keep your meta tags as relevant and your schema tags as detailed as possible, because that is what will help people shop later. Now, how do you go about the schema tags? What is the code for it? I'm not going to share it during this session. You can always Google and find out more details, but do make a note. You can have customized schema tags for price, ratings, and then you can decide what you want, like shelf life, ingredients, quantity. You can decide these tags and you can populate them on Google. Right? There is one thing you need to remember, that if Google has to pick up this information has to be present on your site as well, right? So quantity has to be mentioned on your site. Otherwise, Google will feel you're trying to fool it. You're putting it in the tags, but you're not putting it on the page. So shelf life, 9 months, you put it in the tag, but you also put it on the page. That way, Google feels, okay, this person is not trying to bluff me. Whatever is there in the tags is also on the page. And that kind of makes it a clean environment, right? Use power words. What do I mean by power words? Best, okay? Or offers, anything that grabs attention. So if you're taking notes, words like best, affordable, cheap, premium, luxury, and offers, a number, especially a number, grabs a lot of attention. So try use these words in your meta tags. They will grab attention. Unfortunately or fortunately, India is best obsessed. Everybody wants the best mobile phone. Everybody wants the best sofa set. Everyone wants the best cornflakes. Right? Nobody wants the second best. Now, India is a little best obsessed. So because of that, in your tags also, you put the word best. But if you ask me, all sites are using the word best. So it kind of looks redundant. If there's a way to claim best, for example, you've been given an award or genuinely your users have rated you high, then I would rather have you put that fact instead of putting the word best, because everybody is writing best. India is best obsessed to do use best, but if there's a better fact or better statistic or better proof than just saying the word best, then that's a better way of going about it. So another thing that you can do is probably use emojis. So you see how Urban Ladder and Hometown have used stars in their meta description. It just looks nicer. It grabs attention. So use those emojis which look professional, right? Like a tick mark. If you're a ticket booking site, you can show an airplane. So any emoji which looks professional is great. Any emoji that looks frivolous, you can avoid, right? So you decide what looks good and probably add those in. With that, we move to the next tactic. A lot of e-commerce sites believe that content should be minimum so that the page looks nice. The shop button comes up, right? Doesn't look cluttered. But SEO is all about content. If you don't put content, how is your page ever going to rank? So 400 words of content is minimum. Now, how you present these 400 words is a choice. So let's take an example. Here, I have how to take care of the product, merchant information, returns and cancellation, additional info. So even though my overview is 2 paragraphs, my additional info could be a good 3 to 4 paragraphs, right? Yeah, my additional info could be way more detailed than the overview, and that's in a tab. Now, a lot of you might question that isn't this like a gray hat where you're hiding information in tabs, not showing it to the user? So let me put it this way. Gray hat, black hat is only when you are trying to fool the user and fool Google. But if the user is finding value in this content, then there is no problem. You can have it in tabs. Google may read it, may not read it, but the user will find it useful. Okay. If you make these tabs using CSS, please write down. If you make these tabs using CSS, they work fine. Google can read them. But if you make the tab using JavaScript, Google may not read them. But if they are useful, the user will surely read them. So design for the user, do everything that the user finds useful and wants to stay on the page. Right? So your benchmark is 400 words. Have tabs and have them in CSS format. Don't have them in JavaScript format. That way, Google and the user both will be able to read the content. So that was my next tactic. Moving on to tactic number 6, reviews. Okay. Reviews are extremely important for any e-commerce site. They build trust. They show proof. But when you show reviews through a plugin, let me show you an example. Now, this is a plugin. There are some pictures, there's some text, there's a thumbs up, thumbs down. Some fancy plugin has been used, right? Unfortunately, these kind of reviews cannot be read by Google. Because they use JavaScript, Google cannot read them. So what you should do is use these plugins, but also put 3 or 4 reviews as simple text in HTML. Okay, so copy this review, put the user's name, and put it on the page as simple text. By doing that, Google will be able to read it. Okay, so say there was a keyword here in the review, Google will be able to read the keyword. So what am I saying? I'm saying 2 things. One is reviews are good. All of these features, images, features, thumbs up, thumbs down, all of that is good. It engages the user. So use it, use plugins. But these plugins are not Google friendly. And hence, take out some reviews, the best reviews from here, take them out and put them as static content on your page. Okay, so that Google can see them easily. Google can read them easily. That way you will be able to make better use of reviews from an SEO perspective. From a user perspective, this is anyways fine. But from a search perspective, from a content, from a keyword perspective, if the review is put in simple text on the page, then that's way better. Right? Okay, let's move on to the next tactic. Your URL structures. Your URL structures should be simple and easy to read. For example, the soulstore.com/men/t-shirts. No fuss, no drama like /products/men/c. There's no drama. There's simple, clean English words. This is how URLs should look. They should be simple and easy to read. Okay. So 2 things. One is they should make grammatical sense. They should be simple. They should be proper words in English. And the whole URL should be as short as possible. Try to have your URLs as short as possible. Okay, so let's see some examples. pepperfry.com/furniturebedsingle.html. Okay. Furniture bed single is grammatically not making sense. Okay. But they have put 3 words together and made a page. Then there's another page. Furniture beds, single beds, modern single beds. So furniture bed single was probably the category. Modern single beds is probably the subcategory. What have they done? They have removed the slash and put this as one continuous string. Let's take a third example. Ebony single bed in Venge finish Mintwood by Pepperfry. Okay. Now this is the product name. Now you notice how they have got rid of all the subfolders. They have put one continuous URL. They've kind of merged and made a unique URL for the page. Now the question is this good or is this bad? I'll tell you what Google wants. Google wants the URL to be as short as possible. And Google wants the keyword. If at all there is a keyword, it wants that keyword as close to the domain name as possible. I repeat, Google wants the URLs to be short. And if there is a keyword, it wants it as close to the domain name as possible. What does that mean? That means that from the home page, when Google comes to crawl, it can directly jump to the inner page. There are no subfolders. So this is a way of making Google believe that this product page is directly linked from the home page. Now, is that a good tactic, bad tactic? The jury is divided. You can either go take this approach where you put a slash, put the category, put a slash, put the product. You can do that. Or you can create these kind of long without slash URLs where the keyword is very close to the domain name. I would say try do a bit of both. Put your category, but remove all the other rubbish. Slash C, slash product, slash P is equal to 1. All that fancy jargon, all the dynamic stuff, remove it. Keep it clean. And keep the keyword as close as possible to the domain name. So for example, slash furniture, slash beds, single beds. Okay. So now furniture is in the middle and then single beds comes after that, which is fine. Yeah. So you may not go as aggressive as what Pepperfry is going. You might take an in-between path. So don't put slash category, slash subcategory, slash product. That's too much. Probably just put slash category, slash product, whatever. Try merge a few steps and make the URL shorter so that the keyword comes closer to the domain name. So take an in-between part and you should be good. Going on. The next tactic is using breadcrumbs. I'm not sure if you heard of breadcrumbs, if you know where the jargon comes from. When we were small, we'd all heard the story of Hansel and Gretel. They were lost and they had left a trail of breadcrumbs to find their way back. So it's basically for everyone who's lost. So for example, if I'm on the mobiles page and I'm lost, I can go back to the mobile accessories page and from there I can go back to home. Right? So mobiles, mobile accessories, home is the path. This kind of a breadcrumb is very useful for Google and the user, right? They find it very useful when they are lost. Remember, there's a jargon called crawling. Google comes to crawl each and every page and jumps into every hyperlink. So when Google is crawling this page, it will find these 3 hyperlinks. So from mobile, it will find a hyperlink to mobile accessories. It will find a hyperlink to home. So crawling is happening forward and crawling can also happen backwards. By putting breadcrumbs, you are letting Google crawl forward and Google crawl backward. I'll repeat this. Suppose I come to this particular iPhone 12 mini page. From here, Google can crawl backwards and go to mobiles, crawl backwards and go to mobile accessories, and ultimately go to home. Okay. So this way, Google is even able to crawl backwards. So every page on your site automatically gets discoverable from some page or the other. There's always a path a user and Google can never get lost. Made sense? So breadcrumbs are super useful. They look a little outdated. They look a little boring. But you should ask yourself the question, is my navigation structure strong enough? If the answer is yes, you can do away with breadcrumbs. I repeat, if your navigation structure, for example, iPhone mini, mobile accessories, home, if this was accessible from your navigation structure itself, then Google can easily crawl your navigation and figure life. But if Google is not able to reach, say, mobiles from the navigation structure, then it's useful to have the breadcrumb. So to sum up, either have breadcrumbs or have a very detailed navigation structure. Have one of the two. If you do both, that's a little too much. Yeah, have one of the two. That way Google and the user can go forward or backwards. Clear? Okay. With that, I come to the next tactic. Whatever you do on your page, allow for a dialogue, allow for a two-way communication. Now, what is the benefit of this? Remember, I was telling you, once the user is on your site, the user should not want to hit back. So for example, once the user is on your site and starts chatting, obviously the user did not hit back. So these tactics are user friendly, but they also help SEO because the user is staying on your site. Right? So a chatbot allows you to answer basic queries. Right? So what is the shipping time of this product? Is there a return policy on this product? All of that could be automated. Or while shopping, while adding a product to the cart, or while making a payment, say the payment page failed, the user can chat. I'm trying to pay by my card, but it's not going through. Immediately, the customer support person can call the person up. Right? So if you start putting your chatbot at regular junctures in your site flow, two purposes are served. One is the user finds more information. Second is the user is not stuck during payment, during add to cart, billing details, payment, all of these steps, the user is never stuck. This kind of helps the user go on and kind of complete the checkout. The reason why it's an SEO tactic is because the user stayed on your page. The user spent time on your site. This is very important for Google. Google doesn't want people to leave the page. Google wants people to stay on the page, go further. Yeah? So this kind of helps them. Another thing that helps is feedback. Would you want to add this product to your wish list? Did you find this product useful? Supposing it's a blog, did you find this helpful? Would you like to leave a review? All of these are also ways in which the user engages. The user doesn't want to pay right now, so he adds it to the wish list. Right? The user doesn't want to, has a doubt, the user chats or leaves a question. Right? What colors is this product available in? And then someone from the site could answer. So ensure there's a two-way dialogue. That way the user will stay on the site. There'll be some conversation. It will become user-friendly, and it will also help subsequent users, future users to make better decisions. Okay, moving on. Another very interesting thing to do is show social proof. I don't know if you have noticed this on various sites. 23 people have added this product to cart. Now, when you say this, two things like, oh, 23 people have added to cart, this product is in demand, let me quickly add it to cart, it's still available. Or 23 people have added to cart, it must be damn good, I also want to buy it. Right? So creates urgency, creates some hype, makes people want to buy the product. So any social proof, right? For example, 10 people from Mumbai saw this product today. Now, all of this is dynamically being populated through plugins. So you need to find social proof plugins and add them to your site. If your site is very new and very small, the numbers will also be small. 2 people, 1 person, or 0 people, which is a little embarrassing. But if your site is popular, once it grows large, do it on products which are popular. Automatically, people will feel the urgency. They'll feel the urgency to shop, right? They will see some social proof and they'll want to shop faster. So I'm quickly going to recap the 3 points. The first one was have a chatbot. Let people engage with you. Let people ask questions. You can respond to these questions in an automated manner. Right? You don't need a human being to answer these questions. They can all be automated. For example, how many days shipping will it take to ship the product? It can be an automated answer. Right? You don't need a human being to answer. Do you all ship in this pin code? It could be an automated answer. So all of these simple questions can be automated. And if there are any bugs, the user is stuck somewhere, then the chatbot could ping a customer support representative and it could be answered by a human being. So that way chatbots are super useful. Have some way in which feedback can be shared. People may want to leave behind feedback, add to cart, add to wish list, ask a question, some way of communicating. And lastly, social proof. So many people checked out this product, so many products sold in the last 12 hours. Some social proof that this product is in demand will create that urgency or the hype around the product, and people will want to buy the product more aggressively. With that, we come to the last tactic that I wanted to share with you, and that is keeping your site Google friendly by keeping it user friendly. See, that's a tongue twister. Keep it user friendly, it will automatically become Google friendly. And here's how. Have a fast to load website. Now I know this is a little contradictory. You add plugins for reviews, you add plugins for social proof. Automatically the site becomes heavy. So you need to strike a balance. You need to have these engaging features also, and you need to have a light page also. Find the optimum balance. If your page loads in 2, 3, 4 seconds, you're good. Between 2 and 4 seconds, you are good. If it's taking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's a problem. If it's taking over 10, it's criminal. You can't waste someone's time. 10 seconds is a lot of time. Right? So try to load between 2 and 4 seconds. That's ideal. So check what all can be removed, what all can be added, so that your site loads between 2 to 4 seconds. Okay. The ultimate goal is that the user should see the page and also engage with the page. So you have to do 2 tasks. You have to make the page load fast, and you have to ensure that the user engages as well. Otherwise, it's a no-go, right? There's a tool called Google PageSpeed Insights, which kind of gives you data on what did the user see first, how many seconds did it take for the first page to load, for the first frame to load, are there any heavy elements on your page? All of this information comes from Google PageSpeed Insights. You can always go check it out separately. There's another tool by Google called the Mobile Friendly Test, which tells you if your page is mobile friendly or not. For example, are elements too heavy for mobile? Or are the fonts too small to read on mobile? Are the buttons too close to each other? So if you try to click on one button, accidentally you click on another button. So it will give you that kind of a report. Is your site mobile friendly or not? A little piece of information. This area of your finger is like 44 by 44 pixels, 42 or 44, I don't remember the exact, but 44 by 44 pixels. Now, if your height of the button is less than 44, the finger will not be able to sit on it, right? And hence accidents could happen. So when you make very tiny buttons, the finger is not able to sit on it. Width wise, it's okay because the finger is not very wide. It's just, it's a square, right? So if you had a button where the height was 44 and the width was accommodating the text, okay, add to cart, right? And that's the width, then that's a good size to have. Then you leave around 4 to 5 pixels again between that and the next button, and again have another button. So that way, if you space out your buttons and the finger can sit easily on the buttons, it becomes very easy to navigate your site, and that becomes mobile friendly. If Google believes your site is not mobile friendly, it will penalize you and it will not let you rank higher. With that, I come to the end of all 10 tactics. Hope you enjoyed them. Let the Q&A keep flowing. I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about IID, about me, IID, and what we do, and then we'll answer all your questions. So IID was recently nominated as the #1 digital marketing institute. We've also been nominated as the best content creator around. We have 3 main programs. One is a MBA level post-graduation, a 3-month certification, and a short-term certification. So a lot of working professionals like you prefer to do the 3-month certification. So in case you're interested, you can go check that out. Or if you want to learn one specific module, say you want to learn only SEO, or you want to learn only analytics, you can do a short-term certification. We also have a free masterclass by our founder, Karan Shah. So you can always go check that out on our website. It's a quick crash course on digital. So if you're new to digital, you can always go check out a free masterclass by our founder. And if you need any further information, I'm always there on LinkedIn, Instagram. That's IID's handle. You can always follow me on Instagram, or you can follow IID on Instagram. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me on Instagram or LinkedIn. So with that, I stop here for today. I'm going to field all your questions. Let me see how many questions have come in. What about UTM parameters in URL? Is that okay? Great question, Yogesh. UTM parameters basically make Google feel that it's a new page that the user is going to. So for example, when you click on a banner on your website, you go to a UTM parametered link, which takes you to another page on your website. So Google starts believing it's a new page, which is a bad thing. So what you should do is you should instead put a tag called canonical. So use UTM parameters, but use a tag called canonical on your page. And the canonical tag will point to the page itself. So it's called self-canonical. I repeat, say it's page A, $UTM parameter. By putting the canonical tag, you are telling Google that anything that has anything after question mark is actually the same page only. So it's called self-canonical. If you do self-canonical, UTM parameters are absolutely fine. You can use them. Website in WordPress is more SEO friendly, or website in pure HTML. To be honest, pure HTML is more SEO friendly because there is lesser plugins, lesser code. You have full control over your code. But if you do not have a strong web development team, it can become a mess. Then you will not be able to. Manage the code in the long run, right? So I would say HTML if you have a good web development team. Otherwise, go with WordPress, because WordPress makes it very easy for managing the site. Pure HTML would make it complex. Which SEO plugins best? There's a plugin called Rank Math, which is good. Yoast is good. All-in-one SEO is good. But my current favorite is Rank Math. You could check it out. Will these tactics work well for sites other than e-commerce? Absolutely. You can use this logic for any site. The golden rule is the user should find it useful and want to stay. Nowadays, we are using .pe.in websites for WhatsApp-based e-commerce. Will Google SEO work on it? Srinivas, unfortunately, not as of today, but there will come a time when this would happen. But as of today, WhatsApp and SEO have nothing to do with each other. But apps and SEO have a lot to do with each other. For example, if you have the Flipkart app installed, and if you search for something which is available on Flipkart, Google might show you a link which takes you directly to the app. Right? So you can do deep linking in the app through SEO, but I don't think WhatsApp and that is connected as of today. Any other questions? I'm right here. I would be happy to answer them. I'm going to give you all 30 seconds. Punch in more questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we could all go home a little early, I guess. Any feedback, any questions, I'm waiting. I'll be happy to answer them. Okay. If I have different sections on website, so whether I should create folder or subdomain. Subdomains are like a different website. Okay. Gautam, subdomains are like a different website. So you should avoid subdomains unless you want Google to feel it's a different website. For example, your blog. If you want Google to feel it's a separate website, do a subdomain. But if you want Google to feel it's the same website, do a domain, do a folder. Right? So I would recommend folder is better. It gets crawled faster. It's like an internal link, but when you do a subdomain, it becomes like an external link when you do it, linking. So it's like another site linking to your site. So I feel subdomains are not that useful. Folders are useful unless, say, let's take an example. Okay, say IID has a portal where you can find information, and has a portal for students to upload their assignments, or has a portal for students to see their mark sheet. Now that could be on a subdomain because I don't want students to come on the same domain and check that information. So create subdomains when you want information to be separated out, when the audience is different. So say your sellers, when they upload products, they can access your site through a subdomain because that's a separate seller section, right? But your buyers could see a domain. I hope I'm making sense, Gautam. And that was useful. Thank you once again, Cloud Bazaar, for having me here. I thoroughly enjoyed answering your questions and giving you this information. Good luck and have a great day ahead. See you. Bye-bye.